Welcome to the On After School Prezi on maximizing inclusion and participation. The session's aim is to introduce you to some of the fundamentals and principles, provide you with some tips for your program planning, offer some suggestions on how to adapt or modify your activities, and share links to organizations, tools, and resources. Let's get started. Research tells us that recreation and leisure activities are important for the quality of life for all people. Our role as after-school leaders is to provide recreation and leisure that's inclusive, accessible, and enjoyable for all participants. So we need to begin by asking ourselves, are we embracing all individual children? For example, are we empowering children with a physical or intellectual disability? In this video, we'll focus mostly on these types of challenges. However, it's important to also consider children from all cultural and linguistic backgrounds, as well as children who are impacted by mental health challenges. Inclusion is using an inclusive approach, which involves actively promoting programs to everyone in the community and planning ahead for their participation. Let's consider some barriers to participation. There are 4.4 million Canadians with disabilities, and recent studies have indicated that as low as 3% of these individuals may be participating in regular organized physical activity. Let's consider barriers to participation. A lack of accessible facilities and programs, a lack of information about available programs, increased costs for specialized equipment and for transportation, and a lack of appropriately trained staff and volunteers. Having the right skills is important. Having the right attitude towards inclusion is even more important. What are some principles for maximizing inclusion for you to consider? Look for abilities first. Plan around what your participants can do. Assess the barriers to participation. Your physical space, equipment and materials, transportation, type of activities, skills and confidence of your staff and volunteers, etc. Aim to engage all participants. All kids value opportunities for building friendships, having fun, helping out, sharing their ideas, etc. Provide training for all staff on inclusive approaches. Don't leave it to an expert. Every single person has a role to play. Consider what type of support, if any, is needed. Don't adapt if you don't need to. Look for ways to facilitate inclusion. Do you need additional staff or volunteers? Will you need to modify equipment, materials, or the activities themselves? Seek input from family, teachers, or others that know them well, and be sure to ask the individual themselves, what would make this activity more enjoyable for you? Explore the resources available in your community for access to training, tools, partners, and other resources. Planning to adapt your after-school programs? Here are some tips to keep in mind. Adapt only when necessary. Many people with disabilities don't require any modifications to participate effectively. Don't make assumptions. Ask first. Communication is key. One size doesn't fit all. Adapt as necessary and on an individual basis. Most of our communities are highly diverse, and so are people's needs. Do your homework. Talk with participants and find out what adaptations, if any, people need before making changes to the regular program. Openness, flexibility, and creativity are also important. This is a learning process for everyone. Some examples of easy adaptations. Some general ideas. As we've said, ask participants what they enjoy or what makes an activity easier or safer for them. Understand your participants and their needs and interests. Select equipment and materials with a wide variety of uses. Consider how you can modify or adapt your space, your activities, and your approach for those who prefer visual or verbal instructions. To facilitate mobility of participants in wheelchairs, how can you make your activities fun and safe for everyone? For soccer, use walking instead of running. Reduce the playing area. If a student's in a wheelchair, allow them to hold the ball on his lap while pushing the wheelchair. Use a deflated ball, Nerf ball, beeper ball, brightly colored ball, depending on the needs of your groups. For arts and crafts, drama, and music. If a child has limited vision, use verbal or written instructions in large font. If a child needs to sit, use a table easel. If a child has challenges with fine motor skills, stabilize craft materials with tape or Velcro. If a child has a physical disability, use larger, easier to use props and materials. If there's a child with a mobility issue or in a wheelchair, ensure the area is free of tables, chairs, or other barriers. If a child has a cognitive impairment, have everyone use a buddy. Have on hand easily used instruments such as hand drums, bells, etc. There are lots of creative ways to help make the programs more enjoyable. This has been a quick overview on maximizing inclusion and participation. There are many great organizations across Ontario that have resources and training that can help your efforts in creating an inclusive approach. Here are 3 examples. And don't forget to check out www.onafterschool.ca for additional after-school programming resources. Thanks for checking out this Prezi.